Welcome to BWI Live. Happy 4th of July weekend. Today is Friday for America. So we're here on a Friday for the first time in a long time to talk about Penn State football recruiting. I might even, Ryan, it's not on the rundown, I might even throw in a couple mailbag questions about the upcoming season. But really what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Penn State football recruiting and the final push for commitments, which is coming up this weekend. And then largely the class of 2026 is done. It's in the hay's in the barn. We'll also be looking back at June and having hopefully what is a fact-based conversation about what happened to Penn State football, not just this year, but also last year, and maybe begin to illustrate some of the effect that NIL or modern recruiting, let's just call it modern recruiting at this point, is having on Penn State. All that on the show today. What you should do right now in preparation for that is please like the video. We deliver each week. I mean, it's July 3rd, Ryan. I listen to podcasts. You listen to podcasts. Do you know how many people are actually doing live content this week? Nobody. Is like us and a couple other places.
No doubt, man. Appreciate it. Well, happy July 4th weekend to everybody. Excited to enjoy some burgers and beers with friends and family later in the week, but we got more work coming up, right? It's not done yet. As you said, a couple guys this weekend. I would hesitate to say that it's going to be done though, T. Frank, because it's never done. We know that Josh Johnson late last year, right? You had Bryce Brown popping decision.
Everyone in their first decision, they've made their first decision by
Brandon Finney came for visits last year. There's one thing I'll stress on the board this week is I know fans are upset at, some of these top guys going elsewhere, but if you think for a second that some of these top guys aren't going to show up for that Oregon game in late September, you're just being naive or, don't want to be patient, I guess is the way to put it, because Penn State will absolutely circle back on some of them. There's also some of them that are getting insane amount of money right now, and I don't see those guys budging anytime soon. But Penn State always keeps at it, and that's been their strength for a long time: developing, scouting, and consistency. And that's why they have a lot of success on the recruiting trail. But it's not going to end anytime soon. But we should be at 20, 26 or so commitments, or I would say they're at 20. So 25, I think it would be, depending on Carter Gooden, but we'll get into that in a little bit.
Alan in the chat to say, today is Thursday the 3rd. Yes, thank you. We are aware. We're saying that it is a work Friday because America has the 4th of July off as a national holiday. So effectively for a 3-day weekend, Thursday becomes Friday. We know what day we do know what day it is. We're playing around, having fun with language. Ryan, I asked Nate this, I'm going to ask you this. Are you a parade family? Are you going to the 4th of July? Okay.
Absolutely not. We're going to the Phillies game tomorrow. We're going to take the boys down there, enjoy Phillies versus the Reds, come back, and I'm sure we'll meet up with friends or family and have a little cookout then when we get home from Philly tomorrow. But I don't have patience for parades.
Okay. I was going to ask, is it throwing the candy on the sidewalk and then your kid darting into traffic? Because that's always been a thing.
That's Halloween. Yeah, we've already had that scare already with my 5-year-old. I think this past Halloween, him jumping out and not in front of a car, but might as well have been. I don't have the patience for that. Honestly, I'm not a very patient person. We'll go to fireworks, I'm sure, something like that tomorrow night. But parades, I'm out.
Yeah, makes you good at this job, by the way. Going and getting that stuff, never relaxing, as Ryan said. That maybe the first decisions are over, but this is not over when it comes to recruiting until the national letter of intent is signed or whatever it is now for players when they actually pen to paper. Yes, I will be there and I'm enrolling. Okay, so last weekend, Ryan and I covered a lot of these in the individual videos, but we're here to have a conversation about Penn State's last 3 commitments this previous weekend. Adam McCann-Gibbs, we're working backwards in time, the specialist kicker punter from Ireland. Jack Fuchs on Saturday, who committed to the Nittany. And then Jackson Ford on Friday. I know you spoke to Malvern Prep's head coach about Jackson. So let's start there. What else did you learn since we last talked about Jackson Ford that you find interesting or you think fans should know here on the show?
Just that he's improving a lot strength-wise and things like that. I think Jackson Ford, he's always had good burst off the edge, those things that Penn State and every school covets. And I think the big thing with Jackson Ford was adding that strength and being able to push around tackles. And then that was, Coach Guerrera's big takeaway as far as what he saw progression on his junior season. I think we saw that as well. That's not a complete surprise if you read the evaluations and, just watch some film yourself. You do see that from sophomore to junior year. Of course, he made a massive jump from Phoenixville area high school to Malvern Prep. And, obviously Malvern has produced a lot of players over the year. I think it's the 30 plus Division I players, over 100 guys going, play college football at some level. So, it's just the overall program is just more in depth when it comes to development. And that's why Jackson Ford made a big move there. It's obviously a great academic school as well. I don't want to overlook that, but I think that was the big thing. And it's just as far as his potential moving forward and what he can do, when he gets to Penn State. So there's a lot to work with athletically, and I think getting him into that college program and things like that, that's what excites him. It's also, Jackson Ford's already 240 plus pounds, right? So I'll be very curious to see where Penn State does find that balance, because he does have to add muscle. And that'll be something that they try to do. He's not Dennis Sutton or anything like that. I don't want to, come off as if, they want to stack 30 plus pounds on him.
But he is an interesting prospect, right? Where he's bigger than you think. He doesn't maybe have the outlandish size of a Dennis Sutton, but he's much bigger than you think. And so there's a interesting, we were having this conversation on the message board yesterday. What's the comp to Jackson Ford? There's not a good one in terms of what he brings to the table. It's what we talked about on the video, but I still struggle to find a good, here's a path for him forward, because I think power is a part of his game that he doesn't use yet, that we might see later on in his career that will develop. That's kind of been my point about him, is there's so much we don't know about him. And a lot of that comes down to he's so raw that some of the traits he's going to develop over time based on what you talk about with that athletic potential, they haven't manifested themselves yet. So he's an interesting prospect in this class.
Yeah, so many of Penn State's ends of the years have been more in that 220 range. And then you have Nittany, who's like more like 260 when he got here. I think he was like 255 or something like that. So he's kind of a little bit in between those guys. But he's still a great player. I mean, they know what they're doing. They're going to use him well.
Yeah, and the first commit in the class of 2026 at defensive end, who is still in the class.
Technically the second. Let's not forget about Daniel. I still look at Daniel Jennings as 2026.
Just going to say that. I was heading you off with the past, but as Ryan said, he's a very patient person. So patient. Jack Fuchs is the other player who committed last weekend. 6'8", 300-ish pounds. Anything else you've dug in on with Fuchs on his fit at Penn State and what Penn State likes, or kind of the capper to that offensive line class we talked about?
Sorry, I'm texting a coach at the moment. Text you back in a second. Sorry.
You guys are seeing the action as it unfolds.
Sorry, I was trying to handle three things there. You said Jack
Fuchs.
Books like books. I'm going to just keep saying books like books. No, I wouldn't. I mean, I don't really have a ton more to add that I haven't already talked about with him. Obviously, the size and the testing, he did all that already. So Penn State feels comfortable in what he's bringing there. But, as far as why he chose Penn State, all those kind of things, it's pretty much what we discussed. It really kind of came down to Kentucky and Penn State. And, was Penn State going to have room for him? It was no secret that they were, trying to get Grayson McHugh and some other guys. Obviously, Marlon Bright will announce on Saturday. And it really just kind of came down to, how the cards fell as much as anything. They have always liked Fuchs, but at the same time, they, Grayson McHugh and Marky Walbridge have been long-term top prospects that they've been on for a very long time. And those guys are in 4-star plus ratings for a reason. So, really just kind of came down to, is he going to stick with Kentucky? Is he going to have an opportunity at Penn State? That's really the gist of it. I honestly don't have a whole lot to add that we didn't discuss in the video already.
That's all good. Let's shift. I don't know anything about, and I know
we're going to talk about McCon Gibbs.
Do you want to? Do you have stuff about that? I don't have anything on it.
Not a ton. I mean, I think it's awesome that he plays Gaelic football. I would love to see some of that. I just remember when Penn State went over there to Ireland and learning a little bit about Gaelic football. It's a pretty interesting sport. But no, I mean, obviously we know that he's part of, I think it's leader kicking, I believe, Taj Lead, I believe is his name. He played in Canadian football and things like that. And he's kind of, PPI recruits. I'm not sure, maybe some fans are familiar with it. It's, Brandon Collier runs an organization in Europe where they, kind of finding guys who would fit college football and brings them over here to the United States to, test them and do different things, different camps. It's kind of similar to that, but for kicking. And the big takeaway, I think most interesting thing is that group, leader kicking, they have a relationship with Penn State's new special teams analyst, Alan Tucker. Alan Tucker was at Troy previously, joined Penn State this year, but leader kicking sent a kicker to Troy, right? So there is some kind of a connection there. I think obviously when Penn State missed out on, I forget the kid's name who went to Georgia, that's when they kind of circled back on McCann Gibbs. They were always really interested, but what was the kid's name went to Georgia? T. Frank, come on, you're a kicker guy. Where's Fitz when we need him? Where's Fitz when we need him?
I'm the kicker
the
guy.
specialist. The specialist. I'm teasing with that. Fitz is the specialist guy, but
yes, he is.
yeah. But anyway, after that, they kind of circled back on McCann Gibbs. Came out, tested with the staff, and obviously they liked what they saw. Sent him back with an offer. Got to go talk with the family when you're 8 hours across the pond, I guess, before
right.
Maybe making an immediate commitment. But of course, he does that a handful of days later. So I think he's going to be. I'm not sure if he's going to be a punter or a kicker. Does Fitz kind of dug down on that? Maybe I've heard a little bit more about punting, but I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, the last thing I knew is that he could do both. Initially I was under the impression he was a kicker, but then the door opened for both as far as I could understand. Sorry, I'm looking for, because I know Greg wrote an article at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, which you can go through all of our recruiting articles over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and you can find the name of the kicker that went to Georgia.
Aaron Zaricat. I can't pronounce his last name. I can't pronounce his last name. Zakariat? Yeah. That was him. But I just know when Penn State was making a hard push for him, they liked him as both a kicker and a punter. So I need to dig a little bit more on Adam, McCann Gibbs, to be honest with you. I just there's enough going on at the moment where I didn't have the opportunity to dig on the Irish specialist, but we'll get to it.
So here's the problem. I'm glad you found the name, because I'm on the 4th page of articles that we wrote, and I'm still in June. And I think that information was in late May. So
I do believe it's punter. I'm
the
pretty
sheer
sure
volume of information at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Great reason to go and subscribe right now to the site, where you can go and you can get that information. You can read about the recruiting. There's so much stuff that Ryan covers that he doesn't remember all of it here on the show. And when we need that information, or where you need to go get stuff, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com is a place I go to learn from these guys myself, where we're not having these conversations all the time, behind the scenes. A lot of the things I learn from these guys when I'm on the site, either on the message board or in what they write. So join me over at the site, just $1 for the first week to try it out. Ryan, I'm going to jump into the chat for a couple things here, and then we'll get on to Kevin Brown at the 5-star challenge. First thing is Beach Wine Guy says, happy 4th, everyone. May you have as many fingers on the 5th. Yes, careful with the explosives. This is a very American holiday. Don't want anyone to come away with...
How else am I going to post commitment stories? Jeez, you'll have to do it all, T.
Frank. We also have Like an Auto Styling, who's back. He's they're a regular here during the regular season, especially on the post-game show. Work's been crazy, but finally catching a live show. You guys are doing a great job getting us through the offseason. Appreciate everyone at BWI. He says, with a super chat donation, always appreciate those. Meaningful to us, directly supporting the show, directly supporting what we do here. So thank you very much. And then our no context post of the day comes from Joel Nye, Ryan. Motto should be, if Ohio State and Notre Dame can do it, Penn State should be able to do it as well. No stupid excuses. So you heard it from Joel Nye. There are zero things that we're going to talk about on the show about June that have any bearing on what Joel thinks.
Cash out that Bitcoin, buddy. Donate it. I don't know what else to tell you.
All right, so let's talk about Penn State's. Is he going to be a 5-star? Like, is Kevin Brown going to be a 5-star here?
I think.
Yeah, at the Rivals 5-star challenge, seemed like he did pretty well. And if you're at the 5-star challenge and you're the MVP of your position, one would seem to lead to the other.
Now,
right?
Not all the 5-stars go to the 5-star challenge. Let's clarify that.
Okay.
There's a lot of guys who. June's such a busy period. It's a tricky spot with all these camps, right? Because the Rivals 5-star challenges around there. You got OT7s, you got Elite 11s, you got all these kind of things going on at the same time that guys kind of have to pick and choose it at times. But look, I've said a million times, well, maybe not a million times, but I've said many times, I think Kevin Brown is maybe the best offensive line prospect I've really been able to watch. Obviously, I'm not traveling all over the country and evaluating guys like Charles Power is, but I've seen a lot in Pennsylvania over the years. Cooper Cousins is really good too. I don't want to overlook that just because Penn State obviously just got him a couple years ago. He's a guy we watched a ton of, and Cooper Cousins is awesome. But Kevin Brown's athleticism plus now the size he is stacking, oh my gosh, is just incredible. And I talked to someone about this. That was like a year and a half ago, I feel like, or at least a year ago. And they were pretty adamant that Kevin Brown was incredible prospect that Penn State absolutely had to land. And then they made sure to mention, oh, by the way, keep an eye on Maxwell Hiller because he's going to be amazing as well. And right now he's on pace to be a 5-star prospect.
Yeah.
So I think Kevin Brown absolutely deserves the opportunity to be a 5-star player. He was right on that bubble, right? I think he was like 35th. And then on 3 only moved him down a little bit. It's weird. I got Rivals on 3. I don't know how we're going to handle this. We got to figure that out here in the coming weeks. I think next week we got to say Rivals all the time. But anyway, Charles moved him down a little bit. And look, he missed basically his entire junior season. He played a little H back on the way back once his foot finally got better. But he didn't move a lot. It was mainly other guys moving up. And of course, that was pretty early in these 2026 rankings as well last fall. So right now he's at 50-ish. Right. I mean, that's still only 15, 20 spots outside of being a 5-star. And for them to be able to really evaluate him against some excellent defensive ends over at the 5-star challenge and really see how much he's grown physically as well. And still has that that ability to move, especially laterally. I don't know how he could not be moving up at some point here in the months ahead. Of course, his senior season film is going to play a big part in that, whether he ends up a 5-star or not. Penn State knows what they have here. They have an incredibly special offensive lineman, a guy who maybe not get on the field right away. It's always hard to do that as a freshman, but this is a player who absolutely should be a 2+ year contributor, maybe 3, depending on where he's at NFL wise, because that's the kind of ceiling we're talking about.
So for those listening on the podcast, he's 53rd in the industry ranking here that you can see on the YouTube channel, 94.5 overall. Rivals, he's the 34th overall player, so much closer in that lineup of being a 5-star player. 93, 80, and 247 in ESPN, so that's where that composite ranking kind of comes into play. Meeting out in the middle, right around where On3 has him. A couple things that you said that I want to follow up on. Cooper Cousins, the raw size, the power, the potential. Obviously, he's making good on all those things. But you mentioned the thing that I think is really important about Kevin Brown is we haven't seen a Penn State offensive line recruit with the technical advanced skills of Kevin Brown and the athleticism, where the size is coming along and all these things are kind of rolled up into one package. You had Javen Williams, who was a hyper athlete, but the positional skills were lagging behind because of the way his offense operated, never throwing the football, not really having that pass set ingrained in him. I mean, Kevin Brown has all of those things. The one area that I know we talk about with Kevin Brown, we've talked about it on the show, he will be an outlier at tackle based on his dimensions, where the size profile, as much as he is getting bigger, and I think size, people can misinterpret size as to only be about, weight or height. Size, there's a couple different components to it, right? And so he's making up ground in terms of growing into his frame, but that frame overall on 3 has him as an interior offensive lineman because he does not have tackle length. That being said, you mentioned the athleticism. Guys who are athletic enough can play on the outside. Like in college, there's no question he can play tackle. Long-term, all those things. Does he become a first-round guard? Does he become a first-round tackle? How does all that develop? That's, I think, baked into the 5-star conversation. It's a very convoluted way to talk about this but that's what the 5-star representation is this is a future first-round draft pick. We're putting planting a flag right now. This guy is going to be one of the top 32 players in 2030 or whatever.
Be careful, everybody. Be careful.
Yeah. 20.
Here's the thing I will say is I still think long-term interior is where he would be an NFL player if that became the case. So that's why I'd be hesitant on being like, how tackles are. I mean, tackles are just coveted, and his length isn't at that level. 6'4.5-ish. I think it's like 33-inch arm. Like, he doesn't have that length of the Olus and all those other guys who deserve that kind of.
There are 6'4" tackles in the NFL.
Absolutely.
The point being, he would be then an outlier, and outliers exist. That's absolutely a thing that happens, and he has the traits to be an outlier, but you don't count on that. You don't bank on an outlier. They happen, and then you're happy to find them if you're Penn State. But I guess just kind of the nuance and the details of the conversation with Kevin Brown that I find fascinating in the recruiting and evaluation side of things. For Penn State fans, do you care? Maybe that's the question of the day here on the show. Do you care about any of that, or you just want it to be a 5-star? I imagine you just want it to be a 5-star.
Well, I mean, yeah, you care about both, right? Because there's been a lot of 5-stars over the year who don't develop. But the thing with Kevin Brown is like, I'm not worried about development here at all, because his mentality has always been that. I mean, his dad played at West Virginia, right? I think he played for the Steelers a little bit. Like, he is grown up. His dad has been forming him into this kind of a player for so long. I have a lot of respect for Tim Brown, and just kind of the way he handles his son's recruitment and development. And but he's also like not one of those crazy dads either, where he has fun with it. Like, I really respect the way they've gone about molding Kevin into the player he's become. And by the way, he has a little brother too, who just got an offer from West Virginia. So we'll be talking about him at some point, I'm sure.
I'm sure his little brother's like 6'4" already. So little is a
He could probably bench press me.
Yeah. Today's show is brought to you by My Perfect Franchise, longtime supporter here of the BWI Live Recruiting Show, Andy Ludicky and My Perfect Franchise. Okay, so you work a lot, right? You work in corporate America. You do a lot of the work that creates the money for your company. And you get a portion of that, right? Like your salary represents a certain percentage of the profits of the company. But what if you're tired of that part and you want to define for yourself, not just the money part, but the freedom and the American spirit of owning your own business, being your own boss, determining your own destiny? Well, guess what? Andy Ludicky and My Perfect Franchise, they have the path to that if you're the right person. So check out Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. If you have business experience, corporate experience, you have that managerial, I understand how businesses work and I want to run my own. Well, there is a way of not just having to start something from the ground up, going through all of the hard parts. You can buy into a franchise, which is buying into a corporation. You own the individual franchise. And Andy has done this enough that he has opened up his own shop where he teaches people this process from beginning to end. He'll be with you, so there are no surprises. Going and looking at the book, understanding what the size of the company is, what it does, how it functions. He's done this himself. He's gone through the pitfalls. He's gone through the highs, the lows. It doesn't mean you're going to work less. It just means that the work you do is going to go more towards your future than somebody else's. And of course, he now has I think he calls it Oak Charter Financial. I apologize if that's not correct, but he can help you buy a local small business as well. So he's expanded. If there's a business you're interested in, he can help you buy any of these businesses. And with the franchise consulting, that is 100% free to you, because he has a great reputation with companies and they want his leads and he wants to help you. So check him out, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. I'll put this up again, 404-973-9901. Or Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, where you can go to his calendar and get on his calendar so he can talk to you, schedule a time, and see if you're a right fit for what we just talked about, and determining your own future, which is something I think all of us really want. Also, coming up this month, it's July, and that means the Happy Valley Brew Fest is coming back to State College. I got to do that again. Happy Valley Brewers Fest is coming back to State College July 19th. So just 2 weekends away, I want to say. Yeah, 2 weekends away. So make your plans right now. It starts with your VIP admission at 3 o'clock, general admission at 4. It's in the Porter North lot right across from Beaver Stadium. You'll have access to Medler Field, so you can check out not only the view, but you'll have the facilities after you've had a beer and you want to go and you want to use not a porta-john. That's a nice thing there, where you can have the best tailgate to get you ready for August, where Penn State's going to be playing Nevada just a couple weeks away. So come back, have a pre-football season reunion with a bunch of different Penn Staters, over 75 breweries from Pennsylvania and beyond. This is a very Penn State-centric event where people that have gone to have breweries all the way to Maine even are coming here because they want to be part of this Penn State community. It's a great excuse to come back to State College. Everyone wants a reason to come back to Happy Valley, especially in the summer. The most underrated time to be here because the weather's beautiful. You can sit outside, have a beer, and there's going to be live music, local food vendors, and an awesome atmosphere where you can talk to beer nerds and learn about the beers. Because here's the thing. I was talking to Fitz about this last time. I love learning about things, and I love good beer. And if you can learn about good beer, you'll know what to look for next time. If you're new to this sort of stuff, VIP general admission tickets are both on sale right now, so go check it out. Perfect reason to return to Hoppy Valley. HoppyValleyBrewersFest.com to get your tickets. One more time, Saturday, July 19th, kicking off at 3 o'clock. Okay, so this is the final weekend for Penn State and their recruiting efforts. So this is coming into the home stretch for the first official decisions for these announcements. We've got 4 players in the near future who are going to make their decisions: Tyson Harley, Marlon Bright, Carter Gooden, Dorian Barney, and Travis Johnson. That's 5, actually. Sorry. So Ryan, let's go through this list and just talk through it. Let's start with Marlon Bright, because he's the guy we've talked about a lot in terms of, like, he hasn't committed yet, but, like, how do you feel about this particular conversation?
Are you sure he hasn't committed yet? I kind of think he's committed already.
I don't know, Ryan. I mean, he's been at Penn State more than I have, and I live here. So
yeah, I was going to say he actually probably has visited Penn State as much as I have in the last year. But look, I mean, you take 2 official visits to Illinois and West Virginia. You have an official visit scheduled to Syracuse right before Penn State, and an official visit scheduled to Rutgers right after Penn State. And you cancel both of them and just come to Penn State. And then, oh, by the way, after that, you then camp at Penn State on June 6th, and then you return for the Whiteout Lash Bash on June 22nd. So I think, whenever you see guys showing up to camp when they haven't quite made their commitments yet, I think that says something. And credit to his family. Like, listen, I put a RPM pick in for Marlon Bright. It was like back December. One, I thought he was going to come to the SMU game. I don't believe he did. But I thought, like, oh, wow, this guy's been trending this way for a long time. I think he's coming back for SMU, which, of course, you have to pay for your own way and all that. Anyway, he didn't end up showing. But the point being there is that this was a guy who every single time he visited, I think it was in February and then in the spring, we were on high alert for something to happen. And credit to him and his family. They always wanted to announce it at their family reunion, which I think is really cool. Obviously, this is a big moment for them, and to do it with their family when they get together every year. I believe it's out in Pittsburgh, by the way. So, of course, he's in Upper New Jersey. But, they're going out there this weekend to see everybody and have a big celebration together. So awesome. Credit to them. But I do fully expect Penn State to be the school here. We've talked for a while about the tackle position, right? And, you don't see Marlon Bright on the commitment board, but, I think deep down Penn State knows that they got him, and 6'6", 270. There's a lot to like there as far as what they can mold and build. Solid athlete. He's not the freak athlete that some other tackles have been, but it's a lot like Jack Fuchs, by the way, where it's, his sophomore film to his junior film. And then Penn State both of them have camped at Penn State. I think Marlon, I don't know if Marlon tested this year when he camped at Penn State, or at least I haven't heard that he had, or I didn't see him doing that. But he has tested before, and they knew where that solid base is. And then, of course, when you know where you're building off of as a rising sophomore or junior, and then you can watch the film and obviously stay in touch with coaches and gather information that way. So they know the kind of athlete he is. And look, he was, for a long time, it was Marky Walbridge, Grayson McHugh, Marlon Bright. Those were the 3 guys that were consistently mentioned to me as, like, they got to get these guys. And obviously Penn State wanted to land 2. They were as always, they want to land all of them, right? But they wanted 2. The Grayson McHugh's the one that kind of got away. Charlie Tom then kind of came into the mix then as a guy that they were hoping. His mom went to Notre Dame, so it is what it is on that situation. But to make sure that they got Marlon Bright, at least one of those guys, is incredibly important in this class. We'll see what happens as far as Fuchs' progression, which, again, athletically, there's a decent amount to work with Fuchs at 6'8". He has to just kind of get stronger. Like, that's kind of been his thing. They want to see him at that size, pushing guys around more. Look, Fuchs, I know we're starting to talk about Bright, but, like, the thing with Fuchs that keeps getting stressed to me, maybe I should have said this earlier when we were talking about Fuchs. I think about it, T. Frank, is that he's done.
It's a good thing it's an hour-long show.
Yeah, they think he's done growing. So the point with that is, like, when you're constantly growing and progressing, as a high schooler, now they think he's kind of getting maxed out. Now's the opportunity then for you to take those next things to the step as you fit your body and kind of figure out.
I kind of hope he's done growing at 6'8". I mean, if he gets any taller, it might be a problem.
I mean, I can't. You interviewing him in a couple of years, I can't wait to see that. But anyway, but Marlon Bright, Penn State's really happy to have him. I believe he'll probably be their 5th and final offensive lineman, but you never know. Penn State's certainly not going to give up on Grayson McHugh. Marky Wahlbridge is I expect him to end up in Michigan, but that's also a guy who has been incredibly quiet throughout his whole recruitment. So I'd be shocked if Penn State didn't keep trying to chip away there. But I always thought 5, maybe 6 was the number in this class. He'll be the 5th. And, if all goes as I expected to, probably the final.
Yeah. There's a lot to work with Marlon Bright from that size perspective. If he commits, we'll talk about that on his commitment video. And of course, during his film eval, but it's an interesting mix of offensive linemen this year. I actually made a 5-man offensive line with the committed players from 2025. And because of, our reporting and what Ryan has done, maybe I threw Marlon Bright in there, and I don't think he ended up where you would expect, just based on the talent and the guys they have in this class. So it's just an interesting mix of players this year. And once again, like I have some thoughts of where these guys will land. I put it in that article. We can talk about that a little bit later, but we got to get to some of the other players. Dorian Barney in the chat. Somebody earlier asked, Dorian Barney is really going to end up at Michigan. I know he's making his decision this weekend as well. Yeah, Brad says, hey, Ryan, is Dorian Barney really going to end up at Michigan? I understand the big draw for a PA guy going to Michigan. Can you set the record straight for Brad here on some of those details that I think are a little bit go for
one thing I'll say about Dorian is he grew up in Erie, but he's been in Georgia now for 3-4 years. So yeah, we as journalists and stuff on all that, I will certainly be pointing out the fact that he grew up in Erie, but it's not like there are these massive family ties to the area. There are family in the area, don't get me wrong. But I don't know how much I look at him as a PA guy compared to maybe Danny Odom, for example. He's going to end up elsewhere, but he was just playing in Pennsylvania a year or two ago before he went to Florida. So mine's a little bit different with that situation. But yeah, I expect Barney to commit to Michigan. Here's the thing I'll say is, and just from asking around the colleagues and things like that, to me, he's a guy that if he was committing to Penn State, I don't know that I'd put an RPM in for it, because to me, he kind of fits that flip target mold of for a long time it was Texas A&M, but he never committed. But he always really liked Texas A&M. Then it became Penn State, but he didn't commit, and then boom, Michigan at the end kind of comes in. So to me, just when you look at those kind of recruitments, there's a lot of times where those are the guys who end up coming for the Oregon game or something like that. I'm not at all trying to insinuate that, I think he's a guy that Penn State will flip. Who knows what will happen? He may not visit another school for here on moving forward. And he is in Georgia too. So it's not like he can, just easily drive up here in 2 hours. Yeah. But he's the guy that would make sense for Penn State to circle back on down the road, because they were the team to beat for weeks. The one thing that I'll say is I do think NIL played a part in this one. Michigan's being a little more aggressive there, and just from the fact of he had favorites for a while, and it kept progressing, kept going, right? And behind the scenes, you don't know always what's going on. But to me, when that happens, oftentimes it's because his agent or whomever is kind of leading with that is looking for maximizing those kind of things, right? So that's why you keep taking those visits, you keep digging, you keep trying to find little things that this school or that school will throw to maybe try and add to maybe the school that's a favorite, whatever it may be. And again, I don't know all the details of Dorian Barney, but to me, when I watch those kind of recruitments and how things play out like that, that's something I circle as far as guys that had multiple opportunities to commit somewhere and have it.
Gotcha. I also want to point this out as somebody who grew up almost in Erie. The distance to State College is not that different to Ann Arbor. It's 4 hours, 19 minutes via I-90, according to Google Maps, and that's 4 hours, 19 minutes to Ann Arbor. It is
I-90. You mean I-80?
No, to Ann Arbor.
There's an I-90? I've never heard of it. Anyway.
I mean, I've never taken it before, but yeah, there is an I-90. And then 76 to 80, or sorry, 79 to 80, it's 3 hours and 26 minutes. So my point here being, I've been on Erie radio a couple times talking about Penn State football. It is not like a strongly Pennsylvania area. You would think it's a big town for a lot of different things, but it's because of its location. There's a Browns influence, there's a Bills influence, there's a Steelers influence, there's an influence from Ohio State, from Michigan, from State College. Its location on Lake Erie makes it a very, I'd say Penn State still is the major school because of Barron up there, but Erie itself is not like a hard Pennsylvania lean in a lot of these areas. So it's just an interesting thing to think about as well. I know he's, as Ryan said, he's a Georgia kid at this point, but even when you're in Erie, I think that it's fair to say like Michigan is just on the other side of Lake Erie from Erie. So anyway, who else are we talking about here? Who do you want to discuss next among this 5-man crew that are going to make their decisions this week?
Well, Dorian Barney and Marlon Bright are both committing on July 5th. There will be a commitment tomorrow with Travis Johnson committing on July 4th. But I expect him to end up at Michigan as well. And that's not like Dorian Barney was more surprising to me than Travis Johnson. Kudos to Michigan staff. They have made Travis Johnson a priority for a long time. I mean, he has been arguably, I'm sure there's higher rated guys that they pursued nationally, but as far as realistic top targets that they've been after, Travis Johnson's been right there the whole time. And I think not that Penn State didn't push hard for them. They absolutely did. But, of course, there was Connor Salmon. There was Davion Brown.
Yep.
There were some other really important 4-star guys. And I feel like just from gathering information on Travis Johnson's commitment, Michigan has really honed in on him for a long time now. So I do expect him to go to Michigan. I will, Penn State has been pushing throughout the week to try and stay in that mix. But I feel like he's been committed to Michigan probably privately for a little while now. And there's nothing that I've heard late here, as we're 24 hours or so out, that makes me think that there's going to be any kind of drama there. I expect him to be a Wolverine. Penn State will see him in Beaver Stadium, in a year or two from now. It'll be fun to watch.
Are you at all surprised at Michigan's late resurgence here, getting Carter Meadows?
They do it every year.
Yeah.
They've done this last couple years. Look, obviously the sanctions, all those, what could be coming down the road. I feel like that had maybe an impact on a lot of these guys potentially, holding off. But Michigan surging in June has been a storyline for a handful of years now. We know that they can be aggressive NIL perspective. They have some people out there who want to be. We know, Brandon or Underwood's recruitment was well documented on, kind of how that all came apart. And in some ways, when you're struggling throughout the spring and you see all these other schools doing well, I'm very curious to know kind of maybe how donors or it's not really boosters now because, it has to be market value and all those things, but like who maybe have stepped up to the plate here to make big pushes here to help Michigan down the stretch. Because, Carter, we didn't have to talk about Carter Meadows much, but like I'm pretty sure he got like $1 million. And Carter Meadows wasn't really a guy that I thought would. Let me clarify. He's a 5-star player, so it doesn't surprise me. But also, I kind of thought he'd be more along the lines of like a 700, 800. So my point being there is just Michigan obviously got aggressive there, and Penn State was probably 3rd or 4th on that. Honestly, it was more so a Michigan-Ohio State battle at the end. But all of that is to say is they've been aggressive down the stretch here. It's still Michigan. They still have a lot to sell. Time will tell if sanctions or whatever it may become, and maybe guys look a little bit elsewhere. But not at all surprised that they've surged here. That's been a trend for a couple of years now.
So Michigan surging here at the end. You mentioned Travis Johnson. That leaves us with Carter Gooden and Tyson Harley at defensive end, and I find this super interesting. I think Carter Gooden's a good fit for Penn State. I don't know where that one's going. Let's go there and then end with Tyson Harley.
Yeah. So Carter Gooden is the wild card right now. He is the one that, I'm definitely scared of popping up on my phone or random night here over the weekend, right? Where I'm like, no, I thought I could check out for the evening. But I was kind of told the other day it could happen any day now. It's kind of, since then, I kind of feel like it'd be a little bit more towards next week, but I'll still stress that at any moment, we could learn more about Carter Gooden. I feel like UCLA and Boston College and Penn State are the 3 schools. I'd certainly lean towards actually UCLA and Penn State being the 2 standing out the most. I think really what it comes down to is UCLA has absolutely been steadfast on him being a defensive end for a long time, where Penn State has kind of wobbled back and forth a little bit. And, even on his official visit, Penn State's always going to be honest, right? Because they don't want to set a tone or a standard or whatever it may be that, you're 100% always going to be at the end. We'll never move you. Like they're open and honest about the fact that, hey, we're going to absolutely give you an opportunity at that position.
Right.
But, we can't make any guarantees that we're not going to ask you to try defensive tackle down the road. So I think that's part of it. I assume UCLA is being aggressive in some ways financially as well, just because, look, they're not on USC's level, not even close. But when you're big brother school. Oh, sorry, UCLA fans are going to like that, but let's be honest. That
I don't
big
think they'll
program
like
in your
it.
back door is taking things to a whole new level with that stuff.
Yeah.
They have to do something there. So I assume that's part of it as well. But right now, I think it's Penn State, UCLA. I don't want to rule out Boston College. He's been there way more than any other school and is comfortable there. But I think it's going to come down to UCLA or UCLA or Penn State, and it could come at any point. Aside from that, it's been really hard to gather any info on who's truly leading or anything like that.
And just to refresh fans, Carter Gooden is the 168th overall player in the industry rankings.
Yep.
Which this is an interesting one, and I think this presents the exact conversation about Carter Gooden of what is he and what do you view for this Tabor Academy defensive end. 268 by On3. I think that's a good ranking for him. 69th overall by 247. High praise there. And then not ranked by ESPN or rivals in their top 300 players, although he is a consensus 4-star player. I don't know how that happens specifically, but 6'4", I think he's closer to 6'5", he's 260 pounds. Ryan, this is a big defensive end. This is a guy who, I mean, if you're going to play at defensive end and you're already the size of a college defensive end, what happens next? I think, well, it's interesting.
Yeah, Nittany had similar size. It was a little taller, I believe. But the thing with Nittany, though, was that, if you put him next to Carter Gooden, like, their bodies are
they don't look the same. Yeah.
No. And so that'll be the curious thing to watch. They're certainly going to give an opportunity at the end. And I certainly think that, he can hang there. It's just when you have all these other twitchier guys, and that's how they mold their defense of they want speed and that acceleration, that explosion off the end.
Yep.
It doesn't quite fit how Penn State does things. So time will tell.
Yeah.
But they're certainly going to give him an opportunity at edge if they can land his commitment.
And I know that these things are, kind of decisions add up over time, and there's layers to this because you do have John Scott defensive ends and Dion Barn defensive ends, but Amin Vanover was a big tweener that they played at defensive end who 265, 268 at times in his career. Smith Vilbert was a guy that put on weight and was going to play a hybrid role at Penn State and never really developed, but that was the plan for him. There is a role in the Penn State defense of that kind of tweener, a 5 technique defensive end that's a big physical dude that can play on the edge and can also condense inside and play as an inside pass rusher. So it's not a complete shutout, but obviously the archetype of what Penn State wants from defensive ends is that speed and quickness off the edge, as Ryan said. It's just, I think this is a fascinating one because that's a great defensive tackle. I forgot to get his highlights up here on the YouTube channel, but he's a great defensive tackle prospect. This would be a dude that would be an absolute steal at that position if he was willing to play it and go all in on that decision. And of course, that's the big thing there with Carter Gooden. Okay, Tyson Harley is our last player here. So tell us about what you expect out of this and what Penn State is looking at with a player in Tyson Harley.
Yeah, so Tyson and Marlon Bright are the two guys that, I think Penn State's going to get on Saturday. So just to clarify too, Marlon Bright set to announce at 2 p.m. I'm not sure if that's out there or not, but Tyson Harley should be 7:30 p.m. I'm not sure. Again, we put them on the message boards the other day, but I know many of you will be tuning in looking for things. So 2 o'clock for Bright and 7:30 for Harley. I think Penn State has been the favorite here since, I would say, late March. He visited Penn State twice before he got an offer. He got an offer in January, let me clarify. Visited twice before, always was really interested in Penn State. His junior season really was impressive. I'm trying to remember the stats exactly, but I think it was like 15 tackles for loss, 8 sacks. And, oh, by the way, he's playing next to 5-star Carter Meadows too. So production-wise was really impressive. And I think that played a big role in Penn State offering then in January and gathering. I believe he did a team camp before, so I'm assuming they have some kind of testing numbers on him. I don't off the top of my head, but I assume they have some kind of underlying data there. And then, once they got him back in March, it did feel like Penn State was in a good position. I mean, Maryland, Michigan State, Rutgers, and Virginia Tech were the other 4 schools he took official visits to. I mean, Penn State should be beating out those programs for quality 4-star players. So it makes a lot of sense. I put a pick in for him the other day. I believe Wilt Fong has one in. I'm not sure if Fitz put in one yet or not. But, I do expect him to be a Nittany Lion. And him and Jackson Ford together is a great tandem. And then you potentially add in Carter Good, and you have three guys who are all kind of different, right? You got a 220, a 240, and a 260 kind of player. How things mold with, the Chads Colemans of the world and the guys they've got last year. Of course, Daniel Jennings just enrolled. It'll be interesting to watch. But, DN was the position they needed to hit on from a numbers perspective. And then you lose Luke Wafel, who, I thought they had a really good shot at getting until USC gave him the key to the vault, apparently. But, if as long as they do sign Jackson Ford and Tyson Harley, like, that's what Penn State's done for a long time. They get quality 4-star players, they develop them and maximize them, and they have a lot of success.
Yeah, and so that leads us perfectly into the final conversation today, which is our June recap. Those two players that you just mentioned in Carter Meadows and Luke Wafel, 5-star defensive ends, 5-star talent in general. So I want to set this up with the perception, what people in the chat have said, what people in the replies to the videos have said, what people that we interact with on the internet over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. There is a loud, I don't know what percentage of the Penn State fan base it is, that says Penn State got their butt kicked to an unacceptable level, well above what's ever happened in June. Like, it is a 5-alarm fire conversation starting point. That's where we are. And whenever that happens, the alarm bell in my brain goes off of, is that true? Because I think we can have this conversation. Here's what I'm setting up for Ryan. Here's where the conversation. How close is what they did this year so far to the realities compared to pre-NIL years, where Penn State did not consistently get 5-star players in fistfuls? And there are a lot of those guys on the board. Emmanuel Iheanacho, Zion Ellie obviously went off early, but then those two defensive ends we're talking about. And then I'll even throw in my guy, Damari Simeon, as the top defensive tackle in the region at a position where they rarely get the top defensive tackle in the region. But there is definitely backsliding here. So I wanted to set this up. How many misses are there compared to previous NIL years where there's this new dynamic in college football recruiting? So Ryan, that is my question to you. What did you find? What do you think about this particular situation when you think about it?
Yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, there were certainly misses. But there's also like to me, like when we're talking 5 stars, like Luke Wafel is the miss. I always kind of thought Carter Meadows was going nowhere. And just when we look at Luke Wafel in a vacuum, I mean, $1.2 million over 2 years, so $2.4 million. I don't know how his contract's written, all that. Have everyone seen the Florida State stuff recently? It seems like all these schools can kind of do their NIL, their revenue sharing different ways. But I understand why his family can't pass that money up. I do. It is, from what I understood, it's pretty much twice what Ohio State was offered. That's crazy. Ohio State's aggressive. And Penn State was, let me clarify, Penn State was not far away from Ohio State. Like, they were both kind of in the same ballpark. So just do the math, people. Like that, Penn State was being incredibly aggressive there. So yeah, there's quite a few. Emmanuel Iheanacho, always expected him to get silly money. I saw a question in the chat earlier about why hasn't he announced for Oregon yet? His commitment date is August 5th. He's kind of stuck with that for a while. I forget who asked that, but I did see that and wanted to make sure I answered that at some point. But there's certainly quality guys here that they shouldn't be missing out on. But I'm also going to stress that look what has happened as far as how Penn State has earned their 5-star commitments in recent years, and also, how they've done as far as flipping guys and being aggressive down the stretch. Obviously, Andrew Olish is the one everyone will point to, from last year. But I think maybe the more notable thing to stress is, a lot of Penn State's 5-stars are guys who've been firmly committed for a long time and then ended up 5 stars later on. Cooper Cousins was a 5-star at the very end after going to the All-American. I believe Luke Reynolds was the same. Now, Luke Reynolds was a 5-star by 24/7. Don't remember exactly how it played out, but Andrew Olish last year, he earned a 5-star rating at the end. There's a lot of examples of that where Penn State can certainly still get a 5-star. Let's circle Kevin Brown. I think he has what it takes there to be one. It's just kind of whether, does the interior offensive line tag hurt him? Because the way they do 5-star ratings, and they're trying to figure out who the guys that make a lot of sense to be first-round draft picks down the road. And that is how they kind of have that mindset. So keep that in mind there, as far as moving forward. But, we look at last year, obviously they missed out on Jaden Blair, right? Like that was one that went to Notre Dame. He was a big recruit for them. Of course, Andrew Olish went to Michigan originally. There's certainly been those kind of misses in the past. But I do think at the same time, it's completely fair for fans to be upset when Carter Meadows is a regional guy. Luke Wafel's a regional guy. We haven't even gotten Akari Adams yet, who he's right on the fringe of being a 5-star. Whether he's a 5-star or not, let me clarify. This should be a top 100 discussion more than a 5-star discussion.
That's where I was going to go next, where Penn State. So just some of the numbers here. From 2022 on, Penn State got at least one 5-star in each class. This year so far, they don't have one. But as you mentioned, they do have Kevin Brown in the class. But to me, the conversation isn't necessarily as much about 5-star as that top 100, where you have guys that Abdul Carter comes to mind, of a guy that was a superstar, but not a 5-star based on where he was in the class. So I guess is there an erosion in that top 100 for Penn State so far in these last 2 years, I'd say, where NIL has made a major difference in the way these recruiting journeys finish? Maybe not how they start and not how they go, but how they finish.
Yeah, there's certainly something to be said about top 100 talent, especially like consensus top 100 talent, earning money that Penn State thinks is overpaying. And there's a lot of examples of guys being overpaid as freshmen. And look, it's not like, oh, hey, I was overpaid as a freshman, I'm going to take less as a sophomore because I didn't go on the field. Like, that's not how this works. When you set that floor, it just goes up.
Yep.
And that's why I think we've seen some examples of like Miami gets a lot of notoriety for they're willing to pay for guys, but they also have to take a lot of guys on the back end that aren't getting nearly as much money. And I feel like that hurts their depth, where Penn State is trying to focus more on, let's build great depth, right? We don't have to pay some of these over the top, elite guys the money that others are paying them, because we're going to have better depth. We're going to scout better. We're going to develop better. And that's going to be their thing until Pagula or somebody says, hey, let's go to town on the collective, whatever it may be, which actually I don't know how much you can even do anymore because of market value and all those things that are coming into play now.
How much is that in reality going to?
We're going to find out.
I know Penn State will try to follow those rules, right? Like, that's always been the MO, is Penn State will follow the rules that are established. Not everybody's doing that.
USC found a bit of a loophole here where they kind of backpaid their entire team for this year. And now they have the revenue share money. And a lot of schools did this. I'm sure Penn State did it to some degree too, as much as they possibly could, where they fit in as many deals as they possibly could before the revenue sharing started to try and save money on the back end. And long term, I'll be curious to see how that impacts some things, because these numbers are being out there and they're being set, but they're not going to be able to keep backloading like they did this past year. This was like the 1 year where it was kind of different the way schools could go about it. And, we may see. Do
you think that'll change in 27? Do you think that'll
if the market share,
more of a level play?
If the whole Deloitte thing, market share value, what's the right word?
Clearinghouse.
If that plays out the way it's supposed to, then I don't know how you could have $40 million rosters, which is what Texas is being rumored to have this year. I think Penn State's probably, they 40 million, but I think they're probably more like 25-ish, something like that.
Right.
If it makes sense, because they're probably giving about 17, 18 from the revenue sharing. And I'm sure there's some money on top of that. That would be my guess. And there's plenty of schools that are 30s. Ohio State last year, Texas rumored to be in the 40 or, high 30s, 40. That's Sarkisian made sure he denied that, but I'm sure there's some more truth to that than not. The Houston Chronicle's a pretty good publication. But all this is to say, like, to me, where NIL has hurt Penn State the most is landing top 100 prospects. I'll just go down and list, like, it's just the numbers. Like, right?
Yeah, give the numbers.
Right now they have 5. They have one guy, Kevin Brown. Last year they got 2, Olish and Goodman. The year before that they had 3. The year before that, 2023 and 2024, they had 4. The COVID years were down a little bit. Scouting was weird. I don't really hold 2020 and 2021 against Penn State staff that much, because everything was weird in that ballpark there. But like 2019, 3, 2018, 6. So there's a lot of examples of, like, Penn State was getting, what's that average? Probably like 3, 4
Just
guys.
I think the most telling comparison, 22, Penn State starts to really go on a run in terms of their recruiting classes are excellent. 22, 23, 24, they have 11 top 100 players. The last 2 years, they have 3. And that is a stark difference. That is a reversal in a trend. And that is, I think, directly tied to the delineation from when teams really got NIL
2022
deeply embedded into, but like it took a couple years for NIL to really affect recruiting, and you can see like I said, the erosion of that from 22 onward. And I wonder, because that to me is where, if Penn State is going to lose in the margins, these are the margins they're going to lose. So is it sustainable, Ryan? And do you think that there is a reversal on the way with 27? And I know they've got a very strong start to the class of 2027.
The market share,
Khalil Taylor, those players.
Yeah, the whole clearinghouse thing will still, there's collectives for a reason. That's not going away. Collectives are just as important now as they were in the past. So I'm sorry, everybody who is continuing to donating, who doesn't want to continue donating. It is what it is. You're going to have to if you're as passionate about it as I think many of you are. The thing I'll stress is that, like, we set this bar this year where, again, a lot of schools, I'm sure Penn State did to some degree too, back paid. They found ways to get around this start date, and that boosts the entire roster salary, I guess you would say, to levels that it's never been before. How that plays out long term, I'm not exactly sure. I could see, the 35, 40 million, whatever, Texas having to come down to some degree, because again, if market share and what true market value really means, if that's correct, then you would think that Deloitte's going to do the proper job and make sure, like, okay, this $300,000 to a kid to go to a car wash does not make any sense, right? That's the whole point of that. So you would think that it would come back down a little bit to closer to where Penn State's at, but that doesn't mean to me that Oregon's still not going to. I mean, Oregon has Nike money. They have great marketing out there. They're going to find ways. USC found a great way to get around the loophole this year by paying basically their entire team before revenue share kicked in. And now they have money to play with these recruits. So there's always going to be ways to get around things. I'm sure. I'm just like Texas A&M created a collective before anyone even thought about what a collective would be. And then they had the greatest freaking recruiting class of all time, from a rating perspective. So just time will tell. I don't really know the answer to it, how it will play out. What I do know is that the loss of top 100 talent, when you're especially looking at those numbers, like, that's what's hurting me, or that's what's hurting Penn State in my eyes, more than like, oh, they don't have a 5-star this year. Because again, but let me also clarify the fact that their class are usually primarily made up of top 500 players. Like, they have that depth there. And at the end of the day, 30% of your class isn't going to pan out. It might be more than that. I'm just that's a guess off the top of my head. I've never really done the math. It would probably take too long to figure it all out. But that no matter what this guy's rated, a good chunk of those guys aren't going to play out. So it's about stacking talent the best you can. Doing a great job scouting. That's why Penn State
believing in your evaluations, right?
Believing in your evaluations. Penn State has a bigger recruiting staff than they've ever had. And they continue to build on that. That's a big part of this game. They feel comfortable with that. And again, if you're going to pay Luke Wayfield $1.2 million, say Penn State just said, screw it, we're going all in on that one. Well, guess what?
He has to get
1.4, 1.6, 1.8, and then it just goes on and on and on. So,
but he also at that point, the imperative of one player working now is going to change the dynamic of how you coach and how you act, because that is such a significant investment.
Changes your locker room.
Yep,
a lot of things.
That aside, like I know that, but also like, you're going to, like, it's like a first-round draft pick. If you have an owner that says, we drafted this quarterback in the first round, I don't care if he's not ready, he's playing. I know that there's no owner, but you have a significant pressure of, we're paying this kid $1 million. We're not going to treat him like we treat everybody else and allow him to develop on his own timeline. Because let's say that something happens to that player and suddenly Carter Meadows is not a finished product. This is a great example of how he is like a 6'5", 200-pound defensive end. How does he grow and develop? Where does all that strength come from? He's not a great pass rusher right now. Everything that he has, the tools and potential, are ahead of him, which means he does not possess all of those skills right now. And so I'm not saying he's not worth it. I'm not saying he won't make that happen, but I am saying that it might take a couple years, and if you're not getting a return on that investment, you're going to start to get impatient institutionally. The last thing, Ryan, is I think I do want to, just because I wrote about this, it would be disingenuous not to talk about it, of the recruiting rankings are not finished. So are there players internally that could develop into those top 100 players that we talked about, in your opinion, that
Kevin
would
Brown
then
right now.
fix those things right now? Kevin Brown already is one. Guys that
To
just kind of
it's Kevin. To me, it's Kevin, honestly, and that's kind of where it separates a little bit. Yeah, but like, remember, Andrew Rolish, we were talking about the same thing last year with Andrew Rolish. Oh my God, how did they lose a elite tight end to Michigan? So that's where they're going to circle back on some of these top guys. And
I'm sorry, I mean guys that are already committed, like a Terry Wiggins or a Jasir Rogers. Do you think those guys develop into top 100 players based on their talent?
Yeah, Jasir Rogers is a freak of a player, but he hasn't, to be a 5-star. For him to jump into 5-star territory right now, like, you're not going to OT7s and doing all those things, which, by the way, Penn State doesn't want him to do. Penn State doesn't want him going out there and showing how talented he is. They're just fine with him doing local 7-on-7. So it's just, there's this disconnect now of like, what fans expect from numbers perspective as far as rankings and all that. And don't get me wrong, like, Penn State wants to look great in rankings, but at the same time, like, they don't necessarily want some of these guys going out there and promoting themselves either, especially in a world now where I don't know what happened with Peyton Falzone, but I'm pretty sure Auburn was probably pretty aggressive there. Right now, Auburn was also 100% selling him on QB more than probably Penn State has done at times. But, like, still, I can't separate the fact he's going to Auburn, of all places, who needs they need any good momentum they can get right now because they're struggling hard. There's no way that they weren't aggressive from a financial perspective there. So we could go all day on it, man. To me, it comes back to top 100 talent. That's the separation right now. Those are the guys getting crazy money. I also just want to add one more thing. We can't we're going to do this a lot, I think, in the coming years, where in January, everybody's all psyched because Penn State's keeping their great talent. They're keeping their roster intact. They're not losing. Last year, I think USC lost like 23 guys last year, something like that, like a crazy number of their roster, and Penn State only loses a couple guys that really probably weren't contributing that much. We can't love what happens in January and then get so mad every year in June. That those two things are connected, and they will always be connected because Penn State's taking care of their back end guys. They're going to develop these guys, make sure that those guys don't have a reason to leave. Katron Allen had offers to go elsewhere. He didn't. Like that's not necessarily this year. That's more so in previous years. But like, those two things are always connected. So please just keep that in mind down the road, because we're always loving January. Everyone was hyped when Nick Singleton and Aller and them are coming back. And then they're mad when they're not paying the same money that they're paying those guys now to Luke Wayfield. Like, there's only so much to go around.
Yeah. And I think that's a good place to leave it. Let's get out of here with what you're working on this weekend, other than a suntan getting outside. I know we've covered a lot of it, but just remind everybody of everything we got going on this weekend at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. And of course, here on the YouTube channel with recruiting.
Oh, sorry. My earphones just went out. Did you say something, BT Frank?
This literally happened yesterday with Greg. This is exactly how the show ended yesterday. That is wild.
I'm sorry. What did you say?
Can you still hear me
now? Yes, okay. Now I can.
All right. Yesterday, Greg's headphones went out, and I had to end the show just on solo while he was just staring at the screen. So I thought that happened to you. So just like regular recap, get us out of here. What's coming up this weekend?
2:00, Marlon Bright on Saturday. 7:30, Tyson Harley on Saturday. Carter Gooden, put your alerts on. Put your YouTube alert on, right, T. Frank? Isn't that what you always ask people?
Subscribe.
Make sure to put notifications on BWI account, my account, whatever it may be. Because those could come really kind of at any point. But we'll be keeping an eye out. Those are the three I have circled. There's other guys out there. I know the Ianachos of the world, the Barneys, the Travis Johnsons. I'll shoot you straight. I don't think they're coming here. Those are the three to watch out. And hey, if they get all three, they're at 26. We've been saying for a long time, 27 is the number, right? So It's not like they're far off.
All right. Well, like he said, make sure you got us on notifications so we can get to you and have more conversations with you this weekend. Happy 4th to everybody. Be safe. Have some fun. I always say this. I'm not your dad, but I've always found that a little bit of stupid goes a long way. Like, you're not going to have fun if you're just safe all the time. A little bit of stupid is great, but a lot of bit of stupid and you end up in the hospital. in one way or another. So let's just avoid that, and we'll talk about it again on Tuesday. We'll have some great stories. Till then, we'll talk to you.